Alright, so I don't know where I left off really, but I did at some point put this thermostat neck on, and then I'm gonna scrape all these intake runners and coolant runners clean so I can get ready to throw the intake on. And then after that I'll be able to throw the carb on, and then I might be able to get a dry fire on this thing with no coolant or exhaust on it, and then go from there. Alright, I'm working on redressing the intake. I just got this coolant pipe on. I got these all Teflon taped up. And then I'm getting ready to find a new O-ring for this one so I can put it on the backside for the coolant. And I'll build an EGR block off plate, and then it'll be ready to install. Alright, so the back coolant pipe is on. I'm going to build a EGR block off plate next. Alright, so I got this random piece of scrap. I'm going to cut this out with the angle grinder and smooth it down, and then put some gasket maker on it and seal that hole up. Alright, the EGR delete plate is on. The intake is just about ready to get put on the truck. Alright, it got dark on me, but I went ahead and installed the intake. Got it all torqued down. There's two different kinds of bolts here because those studs in the middle, I didn't like the way it looked, so I've got zinc in the front and back, and then stainless steel in the middle is the only way I could do it with the lengths that I had. I'm getting ready to throw the carb on now, and after that it's just plug wires and wiring, and this thing should fire up. Alright, so I'm getting ready to put this on. This is the first part of the adapter plate. I covered that in dielectric grease because it was about 6 years old. I'm going to reuse it, but that'll keep it from crumbling because it really wasn't that bad. But I'll get this put on, and I was missing one of the pieces of hardware, so I'm replacing it with a regular nut and bolt, and I'll always change it out later if it gives me problems. But let's get this adapter plate on. Alright, the secondary piece is on. I didn't have a gasket for it, so I ended up just using some black RTV. That's what was on it last time, and it worked fine. So I'll get ready to throw the studs on so that way the carb can go on. Alright, it's the next day. The carb's on, the adapter's on. I'm going to build a custom air cleaner for it because the ones that come on these are junk. And then I'll do wiring next. Alright, I've been procrastinating on this pretty hard. The last time I filmed anything on it was about 2 months ago, so I'm going to pull it out and clean it up, and then see if maybe that'll motivate me to continue working on it. So let's get it outside. Alright, so right now the truck's pretty dusty. I'm going to work on getting these junkyard markings off, but just see the amount of dust on this thing right now. So I'll acetone the fenders first to get those markings off, and then I'll start using the pressure washer to clean it up. All I had was some carbon choke cleaner, but there's a number there, and there's a bunch of doodles and stuff right here. That was my girlfriend, I left that one. But there's a bunch of stuff on this side, and then there was one up here which I can't quite get because it was in the clear coat, or wasn't in the clear coat, because I think the clear coat's gone right here. So now I can pressure wash the whole thing now that all the letters are gone. So the engine bay is all cleaned up. Exterior's all washed. It's looking pretty good. So next thing I need to work on is getting all the wiring back in it. I gotta go through all that and figure out what goes to the engine, so that way I can get this thing fired up. And then I'll focus on all the other stuff like radiator hoses, filling all the holes in the firewall, figuring out what I do and don't need. I need a brake booster and clutch master and slave, and brakes, and this thing should be driving just with all that, because everything else is pretty much in. So let's see what we can get done. Alright, I've got the brake booster installed. I went ahead and quickly sprayed the firewall just because it was a bunch of rust starting. I do plan on pulling this motor out once I get it driving, so that way I can redo the paint on the firewall and fill all the holes, but right now I'm just worried about getting it on the road. Alright, I'm getting ready to paint the clutch bracket, and then I'll be painting the brake bracket next, just because they're rusty. They were bare metal from the factory, so I'm just going to put a coat of paint on them so they don't look so ugly next time I'm underneath the dash. Alright, so the headers for my hard body pickup came in, and they're for a 3.3. I read somewhere that the flanges are a little different, but you can bore some holes out, so I'm going to test that with, I'll use the gaskets it came with, and I'll put the gaskets that are meant for my truck onto these to see how far off they are, and we'll go from there. So I brought them over to here to see if the flanges are the same, and they look as close as possible, so I can reuse these flanges on the 3-liter exhaust to this 3.3 header. So let's go test fit it on the truck now. So by the looks of it, the gasket goes right over the top of it pretty much perfectly. So if there's any drilling I have to do on these holes, it'll be super minor. The next thing I gotta check is the clearance on the motor to the oil filter and my steering that I put in. So we'll do that next, but it's looking very promising because that looks like it'll just go right on there. Alright, so I've got this side mocked up. It clears the oil filter and the motor mount. You can see I've got the motor mount spaced up a little bit there just to get my oil pan further away from the custom rack mount that I've got, but it's clearing good. I've only got 2 bolts in there right now, but they went in really easy. So it's looking like that it'll be in the stock position for what the 3-liter was originally. So that all matches up pretty good. It's already got the O2 sensor block off ports and the EGR ports blocked off. This one doesn't, so I'll have to figure out how to block this hole, but right now it's hitting this motor mount right here. So I'm going to mark it so I can hit it with the hammer to dent it in a little bit and see if I can get it to clear. It's not a whole lot that really needs to go, and then I can shave a little bit off this corner as well, because I mean it's got 2 bolts, so you know, if one of them holds, the other one can sort of hold, and I'll be pretty happy with it. Can't remember if it was Engine Masters or if it was Motor Trend, but they said that doing this doesn't hurt performance, so what I'm going to do isn't great, but I'm trying to hit in between here and here, just so that way this part will clear the motor mount, and then I'll be good with that. Alright, I'm starting out with this. It's not very pretty, but if it clears, that's good. Alright, so I gotta go further back, because right now the bolts aren't quite lining up. They're really close. So I'll just keep going back on the header because the rest of that will clear. Alright, we're getting closer. It's still touching, so I know I need to hit right about there because the bolt is lined up. It just won't go flat. So I'm going to start hitting right there, and then I'll probably shave it down for the next fit up. But this is fit number 2, and it's looking pretty good. So just a little bit more, and we should be clearing. Okay, it's still touching, but we are getting a lot closer, so I think I'm going to keep shaving this corner off. I'll leave as much meat as I can on this side, and then I can always weld these washers to this part of the motor mount, so that way this becomes a solid piece of this, just to add more strength to it, because this is part of my engine lift. And then this bolt is going in, and these ones down here are getting really close. So I think I only need to go down a couple more millimeters and it should fit. Alright, so I've got 2 bolts in, that one there and that one there. The mock-up showed that it's still really tight in here. Like, I can't get a chunk of cardboard through it. I could probably get a piece of paper through, but I can tell that I gotta pull a little bit more off that motor mount and it should fit up perfectly fine without touching nothing. Probably wouldn't hurt anything, I just don't want to put a hole in this manifold. So next I'll have to find something to fill this EGR hole, and then it's looking like the exhaust might just bolt right on. The angles seem correct, so we'll see how that goes later once I got the truck up in the air. But the manifolds look pretty good. Pretty happy with it. They're only 150 bucks. Couldn't find them for the 3.0. Apparently the 3.3 liters fit with a little bit of finagling, some mangling if you will, but it's getting somewhere. I just gotta get the electronics hooked up and we should be able to fire this thing up, but that is a whole nother story. Alright, so these are my old plug wires. I'm gonna get them cleaned up and thrown on, just so the engine looks a little bit more complete. And then I gotta start routing wires for the coil, the distributor, the grounds and such, everything just to get the motor running I'm gonna do. And then the whole lighting harness I'll redo later. I'm gonna separate it from the wiring harness itself, because this is the brake pedal, this is the clutch, and this brake pedal here I can tap into that. All this is lighting, which has already been separated. The alternator will be connected to the main harness, and then everything over here that doesn't have to do with lighting I'll keep. The lighting harness, like I said, I'll be doing separately. So I have to de-pin a bunch more stuff, but everything that has to do with the truck running I'll leave in this stock harness, because the plugs for the ECU are over there. So it'll take a while, but we'll figure it out. Alright, so I cleaned these up with Simple Green. I'm gonna get them thrown on, and then I'll start moving on to the wiring again. Alright, so 135, 135, and then I did 2, 6, 4, so it goes 2 and then 6 in the middle, and then I've got 4 here. So that should all be taken care of. And then this coil mount I'm going to mount back here up against the firewall, because originally it was mounted to the fender well, and I don't have those anymore. So it should have spark now once I plug in the distributor, the coil, and the grounds. And then I just got to get the starter thrown back in it so I can turn it over, and then get the computer plugged in, and this should fire up. Alright, so the starter's back in. I kind of found out that the black wire is the only one that matters. I think that the red wire is there for something to do with spark, but we'll see if it causes issues later. So now that that's in, I had to pull the oil filter off to get the starter back in easier. And then the bolts for the headers will be in tomorrow, so I'll be able to install those here soon. And then I'm boring this hole out. I don't have it's an 1.25 inch, but I only got the 1 1/8 step bit, so I've got to go out another 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to use this to make it just a little bit bigger, and then I'll get my bulkhead installed for my positive wires to go into the cab. Alright, I was able to bore it out, so now I've got a positive bulkhead right there. I already know the header clears it, so I'll be able to run the starter wire from there up to here. I don't know which way I want to route it yet, so I'll keep everything kind of loose. But I'm going to get the starter side tight, so that way I can put the header on tomorrow, and then I'll figure out which way it needs to go around the header once all of that's installed. Alright, so I got the wire routed. I know that black is sacrilegious, but I'm going to put a little piece of hose right here, just to protect it from the block, but it's on the bulkhead. and it's down on the starter. So now I'll be able to run whatever positives I need right to there for my fuse panel and everything, and then it'll just look a lot cleaner. Alright, so the header hardware came in. This is literal Chevy LS header hardware. Apparently they both have 12 bolts total, so 6 per side. It's the right thread pitch, it's the right length. So then I'm getting this header bolted up, and I got a little bit more modding to do the other side to make it fit right, but I can get them all fully torqued down now. Alright, well, I didn't have any crow's feet to torque these down, but you'll just have to take my word for them that they're torqued. So those are all on. I should have tightened that bolt down. It's an EGR delete bolt. Should have tightened that down before I put it on, but I'm going to get that tightened up next, and then I'll work on the other side. Alright, I was able to get it in there with one piece of cardboard. This is off of a beer box, so it fits in there pretty nice. So I'm good to remove this, paint that motor mount back up, and then I can fully mount it on there. Alright, this side is fully installed, it's clearanced and painted, and so this one's all set. So I'll be able to bolt the Y pipe on and put the block off bolt in once that comes in. And then the next thing I'm doing is this ground strap. I'll be going from this engine bolt right here up over to here. Since I deleted my AC and smog, I don't have a use for this bolt hole anymore, so I'm going to put the ground strap in between those two so I've got a good connection. I'm going to clean this side and then put this strap in. I'm going to build a heater core delete out of some 5/8 diameter hose and some PEX fittings. For right here, I'm just going to loop them for now because I don't have a heater core. I'll buy one later. Now, I'm not proud of this, but it is temporary. Now next I'm going to do that little one right here to this one over here on the intake, and that one I'm just going to use some spring clamps for. Alright, so this is the first valve cover done. I'm going to end up redoing these. This is just rattle can with no primer. You can see where the old intake mounted to, and it's taken some damage when I was trying to mount the motor in there, but I'm going to throw a new gasket on this and throw it in and do the other side, and I'll get these redone later once I can get them powder coated and chem stripped and stuff. Okay, so the first one is installed, and then my bolt to block this off came in. I've still got to tighten it, but I'm going to end up throwing some high heat RTV on here on the threads just to make sure it fully seals, and then I'll tighten this down all the way. But this was an Amazon purchase, N24 by 1.5 thread pitch. Kind of guessed, and it worked out. So I'm going to get this installed. I'll pull that other cover off on that side and do the same thing I did to this one. Just respray it since it got all dinged up when I was putting the engine in. Alright, so next I'm prepping this one. I'll pull the Nissan cap off. I'll leave this on because this will be where the PCV is. And I leave the gaskets on so that way it's got something to hit, and I've got a brand new one right here. So I'm going to get this Brillo padded off, and then I'll wipe it with some wax and grease remover, and it'll be ready for paint. Alright, so this is all prepped with some wax and grease remover. Trying to get rid of all the fisheying that happened last time I did this. So I'm going to get ready to spray this. Like I said, not going to come out perfect, but later down the road I'll be getting these powder coated, so this is just temporary so it doesn't look as terrible. So I'm going to get a couple coats of white on this, and then I'll hit this with a couple coats of clear, and then I'll put it back on the truck. Alright, I'm getting ready to mount my coil back here. I'm going to use the backing plate on this to cover up this hole. At the same time, it'll be grounded because I've got a riv nut here, and then I got a chrome Sharpie so I can see it better. But I'm going to just kind of eyeball it, put it through that one hole there. I'll be able to put an M6 bolt in there, and then I'll be able to pass the plug through here just for now. And then once I finish the whole wiring harness, then it should look a little bit more seamless, but this is just temporary. From the inside you can see my nut zert with the bolt in it is right there, and then my coil pack is right there. and I've got the wiring harness next to me. I'm gonna start putting some of the plugs through that I need for the engine, and you know, I've got some holes and stuff to fill in here. You can see my wheel through there, and you can see my wheel through here. So I've got quite a bit of stuff to do, but that's mounted, so I'm getting ready to throw some of the harness through the firewall. Alright, so this is kind of what I'm looking at right now. I've got some stuff zip tied out of the way. I've got this one kind of cleaned up, and I'm working on this cluster right now. That's all stuff that's got to be shoved through the firewall, which I'm gonna, for now, put it through here. I'll put a little piece of rubber on the bottom because this will cover it, because the bolt goes right through there. So there's a little bit sticking out the bottom. So I'll put all the wires through and then shove this on, and then I'll be able to kind of tuck some behind and hide them, but it's slow going. All right, here's a little update, but kind of getting some stuff figured out. It's a little cleaner in here, and I've got that mess to figure out on the outside, but right now it's coming together. All right, this is the situation I'm in right now. I'm gonna turn the ignition on. Okay, I'm getting solenoids clicking. So right now there's no fires, which is good. I'm gonna see about, this is my starter wire. I'm gonna see if I have, you can't see nothing, but I'm gonna see if I have spark. Like this. I gotta figure something else out. Alright, so this is kind of cool. As I turn it over, you can kind of see it's sparking. There's a big one right there. So I know that that's working. I just got to get it spinning over now. Alright, it wasn't doing what I wanted it to, so I added another ground. Alright, it might take me a second to get this all figured out, but I need starter fluid. Now, I can't let it run for too long because it doesn't have a cooling system, but get right in with it. Make sure it's not weird. That would be bad. So here's my trigger wire for my starter. Power up right here. See how this goes. Yes! I did forget to pull the spark plug piece. So, pull that out. It should be running on all 6 now. This means I got my timing correct. Hell yeah. Alright, try again. It just ran. Running no problem. I could put a fuel jug on this thing right now and it'd probably run. Oh yeah. I'm running out of hands here. I drank through all that. Oh, this is so cool. Here, Sam, would you mind coming over here and being my throttle? Okay.
Almost.
There, one more. Alright, I'd say that's probably good. Hell yeah, dude. She's a runner. Now I really want to put a fuel plug on it. Alright, so I'm getting ready to hook up a boat tank to this. And then I remember I have a quad with electronic fuel pump on it and a tank of gas. No, this isn't what you should do, but this is what I'm doing. Let's try it. Alright, it's a slow drip now, it's not that bad. So. Accelerator pump working. Alright, we got some accelerator pump. See what happens.